Welcome to Signals and Stories 10 Years with the Vertex Project, a limited series exploring how cyber threat intelligence has evolved over the past decade. In each episode, we break down how analysts actually investigate, covering the data and the decisions that shape real-world intelligence. Stay tuned. I'm Callie Fencl, and today I'm sitting down with Jennifer Kolde, aka The Silence, Principal Intelligence Analyst at the Vertex Project, and we have our esteemed guest with us, Kamil Bojarski, who is a cyber threat intelligence expert. I'm very excited, Kamil, that you're here. Kamil is focused on OSINT, cyber policy, and national security issues, as well as a 2024-2025 European Cybersecurity Fellow at Virtual Routes. He also writes and researches topics spanning cyber operations, intelligence strategy, and emerging technology in security contexts. So welcome, everybody, to the show. Thanks for being here.
Welcome and thank you very much for the invitation, and welcome to all the audience who is chiming in.
And have you two met before in person, or I think you.
We actually did, and not so long ago, in very nice
A couple of
circumstances.
weeks ago, we
Yes.
finally got to meet at
cool.
PivotCon this year.
Oh, cool. I thought maybe you guys had met previously before PivotCon, but that's cool that you got to meet very
Only
recently.
virtually, yeah.
Virtually, yeah, but not in person. But PivotCon amended that, very fortunately.
Excellent. Well, Kamil, can you tell a little bit about yourself to our listeners who want to get to know you a little bit better?
Sure, not a problem. So once again, thank you very much for the invitation and welcome all. My name is Kamil. I'm a cyber threat intelligence professional working in cybersecurity threat intelligence field since around 2017-ish. I was working at bigger, smaller companies. I started working in security operations center on the first line as an entry level, because actually my background is not very technical. I've got a law degree, and during my studies, I started dabbling into matters of cybersecurity, intellectual property protection, national security, and so on. And kind of at the time I was entering the workforce, let's say, I was quite fortunate because the market for cybersecurity was booming. Actually, the first company that I worked for was even doing like boot camps and training sessions just because they need engineers to join the teams. And I didn't do the boot camp, but anyway, I joined one of the security operations teams that was forming. And then my career, I was also very fortunate to have to be able to experience many aspects of the fields. So I started with security operations. I work in incident response, DFIR, also threat hunting and threat intelligence roles, and pretty much threat intelligence was probably the most significant part of my career, and still is actually. But I also work on the cross section of threat hunting and threat intelligence, threat intelligence support for incidents response, and many different roles. And also I try to kind of give back to the community. I'm try to be active and present at various conferences. I'm sometimes a teaching assistant for the SANS course for 578 cyber threat intelligence when I try to teach new analysts or experienced analysts actually as well into a strict discipline of proper analysis. And I was also the fellow at Virtual Roots, then European Cyber Conflict Research Initiative, because I'm very much interested in this cross section or when the technical problems meet political and operational organizational problems, because I'm a strong believer in that we can just out-secure our way of many cybersecurity issues. Like it's not just a matter of patching fast enough and employing detections fast enough, but those problems are quite wide. So this is my experience, just because also I'm might be associated with many organizations. Just a disclaimer that I'm here in a personal capacity, not representing any past, current, or future employer or organization that I might be affiliated with.
Of course. And you've spent from what I'm understanding, you've spent your entire career in threat research. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. What initially drew you to cybersecurity and threat intelligence? And again, like, we're talking about the past 10 years because, we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary at Vertex. How has your role changed in the past decade?
Yeah, so so this is a very, let's say, a very nice coincidence because actually I'm kind of almost 10 years now working in cybersecurity field. I believe December will be 10 years actually. So I was also very lucky to experience much changes. Again, my background was I've got a law degree. When I was studying law, the cybersecurity legal aspect, cybercrime, prevention, detection, countering, also from this perspective of penal code and legal framework was very much developing, and I had this chance to experience how this is evolving over time. So I started again working in security operations center. So this was my entry, but I think I very quickly became kind of accustomed, or rather, I've been most drawn to the threat intelligence aspect because I very much like, let's say, to know what's not being known at the time. So when I was dealing with tickets and then handling escalation and this very frontline incident response, I was always thinking like, okay, we are getting those alerts and we are detecting this activity, but what if we can go step forward and actually see what threat actors are planning to do, or the emerging techniques that are out there, and already implement detections and prevention methods and just be step ahead. And yeah, and I'm going to say this once again, is very fortunate because this was a period when threat intelligence was in a way starting-ish in private sector. So I believe the SANS course 4578 was released around 2015, and the APT1 report was 2013. So this was all very new at the time, especially in private sector. When I was starting, threat intelligence was still kind of about feeds and ingesting the indicators. But then the change happened when we had more capabilities with like EDR solution, visibility into actual actions on the endpoint in real time. And then people started getting these ideas of threat hunting, which was a big buzzword at the time, and trying to be more proactive, assume breach, and all that stuff. So from my perspective, this was very exciting time to be in this field. And actually, at my first company, the threat intelligence program was just being developed, and I jumped on the chance to contribute to this development and be part of this emerging team, which was also very nice, having chance to form or to set direction for some of the operations. So yeah, so I thought this was really like the incident response and the security operations center might be frontline roles in terms of response, but I thought that threat intelligence is like really frontline in terms of getting to the adversary, to seeing what they are up to, perhaps even do the attribution, which was also around, I believe, 2016 to 19, a very controversial but emerging topic, with all those organizations trying to say like this is this military unit, this intelligence unit, and all the media attention that came with that. So yeah, so for me it was this kind of um, dream detective role to be able to piece together different intrusion and have this complete picture. And I think this is what also stayed with me to this day, with why I'm in threat intelligence field.
Excellent. One of the reasons I was interested in having Jen on the podcast as well for this conversation is so you and a few of your peers recently did a workshop at CyCon, and Vertex does workshops as well. With Jen and two of our other analysts, Rain and Savage, participating and working on that as well. So I was interested in like the conversation that you two might have in what it takes to create a workshop to teach other analysts and the challenges that come up with that. I don't know, Jen, if you want to start.
Well, we've found, especially within Vertex, as the analysts have switched in our role here from being frontline intelligence analysts to helping create tools to help others do their frontline analysis. Our role has shifted a lot. So frequently we're more focused on what we broadly call content. And that could be a blog, it could be technical documentation, it could be workshops and training materials. And the rule of thumb that we have is content always takes at least 3 times as long as you think it will. So that's always the first one is you have a great idea for a workshop or kind of a general, this is a topic I want to focus on. But finding the data, or in some cases, we've fabricated data to use like a notional scenario, right? We can't always have the real world stuff. And coming up with that and making sure that all of the technical pieces are there, the connections are there, you're able to walk people through whatever educational thread or scenario thread you want to show them is harder than it looks. So we've definitely had some lessons learned in terms of putting things together and what we need to account for, both in terms of engaging content and time to make sure it's really good. We have high standards for ourselves.
No, I can only echo and agree with that, especially on the time it takes. I think the best comment or the best conclusion to that was that one of my colleagues with whom I presented the workshop, maybe I will not disclose which one he not wanted, but he made the like we were halfway through this CyCon workshop and he like whispered to me, I just realized how ambitious project that was. And yeah, and I think this is the best summary, because you've got this concept. It sounds really awesome. It is really awesome, and I think this I'm quite proud of what we did with this. But it's a lot of work, and especially you are kind of parachuted into this situation when you were working on the this workshop, those exercises, and so on for months. But for the folks that are on the other side of the room, this is completely new, and you have to go through all those contexts, and you have to provide it in a digestible manner. And for the CyCon workshops, we had 90 minutes. So the workshop to prepare took months, and to distill it and to make sure we will get to the content and to introduce the context is just I mean, I tip my hat to everyone who is doing that, because it's a lot of work. And I think this let's say translation part is the most difficult. Yeah, because you have one vision in your head, so that's kind of biased. It's I think the same thing like when you are singing, you sound differently in your head than what's output to your listeners, fortunate or not. So this is kind of same manner that you came in prepared with your vision, but you have to always step back and to take into consideration that those people are just new here, and they might not know anything. They might not even be like really invested in the topic, but thought that this is just interesting and would like to be introduced. So you have to take this into consideration. So thing I do is always like when you've got exercise or a scenario, I always do this red teaming in terms of like, I don't know anything. How would I explain any question? Like someone is asking very basic question, what does it mean, what do I do, and so on, and do I have answers to all of this, to not be caught like deer in spotlight in the middle of that. But yeah, so it's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding. I think like we had very good feedback after the workshop. And yeah, and I think the best or the most rewarding for me was when folks were like not very technical or were not already in the topic, but thought this was interesting workshop by the description, or they find some interesting elements, were able to like see it through our eyes and to use the platform and work on this case and get kind of immersed in the scenario we prepared. So yeah, so I would probably do it again, even knowing all that I know now. But yeah, but you have to be
Was
prepared.
was
It's
that the
nice to
first?
have a break afterwards, like because I think we've done 5 now.
Yeah.
And it's usually all 3 of us, like all hands on deck for several months trying to put this together. And we just want to go, we always say we want to go lie on the floor for a while afterwards, take a break when it's done. But I agree with Camille, when it's successful, like when people enjoy it or they learn something or like that light bulb goes on, it's really rewarding. But so much of what you said is very familiar, Camille, is that starting with those grand ambitions and then realizing you only have so much time to present what you're presenting. And because you don't know the level of your audience, or maybe you do, or maybe you're specifically aiming for people who are new to the topic, having to make sure that you're targeting their level of understanding and what they know coming into it, right? You can't start up here if people are just being exposed to either the educational tools or the data or the concepts, and having to always kind of recalibrate. We've definitely had some lessons learned there as well.
So, so the workshop that you led, Camille, is or at CyCon, it was called "Threat Actors Can Do Public-Private Partnership 2: How to Cluster, Track, and Attribute Threat Actors in the Age of Public-Private Offensive Ecosystems." It's a long title.
Yeah, it's a long time. We wanted to be upfront about what will be happening, and we didn't have any limitation for the length. So we thought we're going to go like all the way. Like this is this is what we'll be doing, and include this catchy phrase perhaps about public-private partnership. But yeah, this is the title.
Well, can you tell us, is there, well, I guess, is there anything that you're allowed to tell us about the
Mhm.
workshop? I don't know if it was like something like more proprietary, or is
Yeah, yes. So I mean, the content was the content might be little behind, like close to the chest, because we wanted to also have this freedom to discuss certain cases. Yeah, but in general, I mean, and this I think this is observed across whole spectrum of entities and the state clusters and various configuration of threat actors. We are seeing involvement of private sector and kind of, for example, state operations program tapping into potential of private sector with development of tooling of infrastructure. And yeah, and we wanted to show how essentially models that you might be familiar with as a threat researcher or just as a policy researcher break down. So when I was again starting into threat intelligence, diamond model of intrusion analysis was like the hot stuff. Everybody was creating their diamonds, and for those not familiar, this breaks down the adversarial operation into four vertices, like the adversary who is doing activity, the capabilities, what they are using, the infrastructure, how they are delivering capabilities, and the victimology. And when you take a look at the ecosystem now, I mean, each of those categories could be its own small diamond, because you've got those contractors delivering capabilities like tooling malware, essentially. You've got contractors developing infrastructure and providing the command and control services, covered networks. You've got groups that are contractors tasked for operations. So when you are now tracking a group and you are seeing the tool and you are seeing the infrastructure, like what does it mean in terms of the activity cluster? Like, is this a threat actor? Is this something that we called threat actor like 10 years ago when there was APT1, which was assigned to certain unit? Is that now something completely different? Is that activity group that I think Diamond model was like introduced this concept of activity group, so not attribution, but rather having these observables clustered into one. So yeah, so we wanted to show how some models break down and how to tackle this challenge, how to pivot from the technical reports, technical indicators to some corporate data to understand and then make conscious decisions about how do you want to define activity. So even if you don't have complete picture of the activity, you at least know what you are dealing with, and you can make those informed decisions about tracking, about the prioritization of threat groups and so on.
Yeah, Camille, I don't know if you'd agree, but I feel like from my perspective, one of the biggest changes in the last 10 years is the recognition that the threat landscape is so much more complex than we originally assumed 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, right? You talk about APT1 being monolithic, and in some ways, you could maybe argue that was somewhat true. Like if it was, in fact, as we asserted, right, a specific military unit that's kind of monolithic. But the idea that the military may have public contractors or that you have specialized groups that are responsible for either tool development or access brokering or whatever, it's not like some big, group that we're tracking and we can just shove all this activity into this one bucket. There's a lot more subtleties and I think increased recognition in the field, but it's much more complicated. And you have different actors who are working together in different capacities over time to conduct this activity versus one big group sitting in a room together and carrying things out.
No, I agree. Just with a disclaimer that I think it's that we are now having visibility what happened possibly like few years ago already. So we might be catching up on some of those, but definitely, and in a different context, in different state programs, let's say, it will be also visible in a different manner. Like in many cases, as it happened in cybersecurity across the world, there were those, let's say, grassroots groups engaged in hacking, engaging in cybersecurity that might not necessarily be recruited into state programs, military intelligence agencies, but still then, for example, they founded a cybersecurity companies, technology companies, the folks related to those groups, and now they are getting contracted by the programs. So yeah, so it's a lot to take into consideration, and it's a lot to consider. Like when we are saying APT 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, do we really mean that this is a single group? Do we mean cluster? And I think this, again, I agree that this picture will be more complex because uh, those those phenomena like use of contractors, reuse of infrastructure, the development of covert networks serves in many ways as a force multiplier and a chance to kind of be more flexible with operations. So when you've got contractor that can serve as digital quartermaster, maybe now digital infrastructure master, and then you can have more widespread capabilities across the groups. You can have contractors you can have contractors delivering to different operational teams who can then focus on their own thing, which is great from the state operations program, but maybe not so great from the threat analysis aspect because it all gets complicated, and especially in private sector when you will rarely have the direct visibility into what is going on some close to the source access, like stemming from signals intelligence or clandestine collections. You can only very much guess or count on some leaks or those types of adjacent auxiliary sources to establish the nature of relationships between companies and contractors and threat actors. But it's very much, I think, wilderness of mirrors for how much you can pivot to the ultimate group responsible or properly characterize the relationships. Okay. Yeah, so it's exciting, but it's difficult. It's difficult to handle properly, and I think here the those methodological soundness, the rigor of analysis is really important, because I think it's better to have incomplete picture and be honest about it and know where the gaps are than try to, I don't know, guesstimate or just to produce some attribution on analysis just for the sake of production. But that's just me.
I think we're in agreement there.
So the workshop emphasizes collaboration across technical CTI, OSINT, and regional expertise. And then this is for either of you to answer really is, what are the biggest gaps today between these disciplines?
So from my perspective, by mile, or because I'm in Europe, by many kilometers, the gap is between the CTI technical parts and the regional expertise. And I'm a very, very strong believer that for many sources, would they be not in a different language and maybe in a different alphabet accessible, the scope of reporting that we would see in let's say Western English language sources would be completely different. For example, and also this comes back to how we define the OSINT as discipline and what we think about the collection, technical aspect, and so on. Because I often see this kind of conflation that talk on the malware, maybe on infrastructure, but maybe mostly on malware, are the technical talks of CTI, while the OSINT, the collection from documents and so on, is kind of like, soft CTI, soft sources, let's say. And for me, when I observe this discipline, I would say that the ability to query the foreign language and to understand how the language is applied, so phrasing, local specificity of how folks are talking, ability to use correct key phrases, keywords, and so on, might be as technical as malware analysis in IDA Pro because of the complexity of work. So I think the gap is definitely there, and especially with trying to out technical analyze things that are not meant to be technically analyzed. So having this capacity to go out there for the sources with understanding, like this might be a public standard from other country, but because it's published in a foreign language, because it's in a different alphabet, this is completely like a hard barrier for many analysts to approach. While this is essentially an open source, so in this way I still see this gap, and I think this is why it is absolutely like a necessity to have the regional expertise, to have the technical expertise that is able to track and enumerate or understand the techniques used, malware used, and then be able to join it with analysis on collection from open source and proper analysis of open sources. Because otherwise we think that we understand the activity, but we are very much biased towards this once again hard technical CTI, that because we understood how the malware works, that we're almost there. Why I don't think it is. So I would give shout out to first the folks doing proper OSINT collection work, and that are able to gather the information from the sources that seem very opaque to, let's say, English language only users of the internet, and second to the regional expert, because this is, I think, a very rare occurrence to have someone that understands on a deep level the culture of a certain country, and can then understand like the output of malware analysis, of analyze infrastructure, like what does it mean that it's geolocated, or the infrastructure is in ABC ASN or something like this, and then create complete picture. Yeah, so this is the gap that I'm seeing, and this is the where often I think intelligence process kinds of breaks down, especially if there is no regional expertise. But then we try to fill out those gaps just for the sake of production.
It's always bothered me when people do open source reporting on non-English. That sounds very English centric, but countries that use other languages, and they'll report on a foreign entity in English or in the native language of the reporter, and they won't include a translation. So Chinese companies is a huge example, right? You talk about like 404. I saw very few reports that actually included the company's proper name in Chinese. So if I wanted to go do additional research, I don't even have a starting point. Like that's like a tiny nitpick. But I think the language barrier, companies that are increasingly putting geofencing around some of the content that would be helpful for open source researchers, assuming you could overcome a language barrier, means you need additional technical aids to help you even get to some of that content in the first place. So language is definitely a challenge, but I think that touches on the need for broader expertise in general. And going back to, again, my early days in CTI, it was very technically focused, and we had our eyes on what was happening inside the network, and it was strictly a network problem. And we didn't necessarily take into consideration geopolitics or cultural motivations for what was happening, or broader non-cyber things that were actually influencing the activity. And I think it's great that we have this recognition to some extent now that cyber doesn't happen in isolation, that it's part of the overall set of human activity and the overall motivations for why these things are occurring. So people who have additional non-technical expertise that can help us not only collect data, but make sense of it and fuse it together is really critical going forward.
I had a quick question, like in regards to the language barrier. Like you would, or you might assume like AI translations might be able to help to some extent, but what about like if you're a researcher in a country that's non-English speaking, like using colloquialisms or slang that we're not familiar with, like does that how do you work around barriers like that, or can you?
No, I think you don't work around, like you have to have this actual regional expertise, and yeah, and this is exactly like bullseye in terms of having to know the phrasing, the keywords, the specific language used by the local communities and so on. And yeah, and this is again like this is something that, for example, for the once again very English centric perspective, would be almost very, let's say, cliche or very easy to navigate, to find those communities, those, I don't know, forums or public tenders that might point to specific contracts between government and private contractors. Then for other countries like Russia might be completely, let's say, out of touch, out of scope for analysts who are not familiar with the subject, because you don't even know where to start. I mean, you can have some translation support for like to translate basic phrases, but how do you go from there? Like you reach some documents from the from some public sources, in government sources, and then to properly analyze them in the context. Now this becomes a very difficult scenario when you don't have this kind of understanding of the local ecosystem.
Mhm. Yeah.
Prose isn't terrible. Like you can translate blocks of prose and get an idea. I would never fully trust, machine translation or AI translation, but you can kind of get a gist. But anything that was you're going to rely on for your analysis, you absolutely need a language expert to translate that for you so that there's no misinterpretation. And when you think of colloquial language, right, like chat logs that have been leaked, nobody writes full on prose when you chat or text with somebody. So trying to make sense of chat logs in a different language from a different culture with different, uh, you know, colloquialisms and things like that is next to impossible, unless you have that expertise.
So when you have these teams that, are technical CTI, OSINT, and regional expertise, when in practice, what breaks down when these teams don't collaborate effectively?
So I think that the phrase that comes to my mind is that assumption is the mother of all F ups. And yeah, this is something that I think is the biggest threat, because when you've got this team that like the threat intel team, technical threat intel team, that thinks that they understand the activity, but not really, and they start kind of filling the gaps with their limited understanding of the activity. Then it becomes very problematic, because you can go through different rabbit holes to make all kinds of assumptions based on mirror imaging of how you think the activity would proceed, or what are the relationship between actors that are not there. So when there is no input from someone that can correct the way, or when the team is essentially kind of not staying in their lane of providing, for example, the technical analysis of the activity, to be then facilitated by this kind of regional expertise or some open source collection and so on, then I think this becomes very problematic and very difficult to unwind from this analytical point of view, because you are having people arriving at conclusions prematurely, or just making up kind of conclusions. Um, yeah, I think this is where there needs to be process guardrails on who is delivering what and how you are following some structured techniques like analysis of competing hypotheses or other types of techniques you can use, because then it's easy to see those gaps. But once you kind of go too deep into flow and just providing the reporting and coming up with those hypotheses and commenting on them, then I think it breaks down very much.
I feel like that's a topic, Kelly, that we've hit on in a number of the podcasts, is that I think CTI or any type of intelligence analysis requires a good deal of humility and recognition that no one person and no one team has all the answers. And that's why you need those different experts in those different, subject areas and aspects of intelligence writ broadly, not just like the technical cyber threat stuff, to involve those people and recognize the limitations of what I know versus where I need to turn to a colleague or another team and say, hey, okay, this is what I have. Does it make sense? And can you help me fill in the gaps?
Absolutely. And I think too, you're right, Jen. We've talked about that in a few of the episodes, the lack of ego that's necessary. But I think some like another way to look at it though is it's not necessarily ego. It's like I'm worried that I should have already known this, and I will be embarrassed if people find out that I didn't already know this. Like I think that's at least for me, that's some of it.
So much imposter syndrome in CTI as well. No, it's interesting you mentioned ego because there's a lot of ego as well. It's an odd balance, right? Because you need that humility to recognize what you don't know. But I think we were just talking the other day about the need to speak up, right? And the need to question. And I think you do need a certain amount of ego to be willing to stand up and, put forth your idea and be willing to defend it. And sometimes you're correct and sometimes maybe you're not. But it's an interesting balance, right? Like I'm willing to fight for what I know, but I'm also willing to recognize, okay, these are areas where I don't know as much and I need to turn to somebody else. All the things. It depends, right? You need
Yeah,
both all the time.
absolutely. Camille, so we purposely wanted to record this with you after your workshop because we thought, well, you're probably going to come with a lot of insights after the fact. So, is there anything that you'd like to share that was surprising to you from the participants within that workshop, or any feedback that they gave you on just like on the learning style, just anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah. The insight is that doing workshops is a lot of work. So that's first thing. But on the side, I think the have it's almost like obvious, but having a well-defined examples and exercise help a lot. So if you can, you kind of need to have those two streams of the folks being able to do exercise like by themselves, but also do hand holding if they need it because they are coming from a different background. From the I mean, feedback was really nice. I was also quite worried about this about there's kind of staging aspects, so enrolling folks into the platform and explaining how it works. So yeah, so also you have to assume that people will not be familiar with how you want to approach the workshop. Once the ball gets rolling, it's if the exercise is well prepared, then it's pretty good. So I don't think we had like any very specific feedback on what folks like, but generally that what came out is that they really like the flow of the workshop. So we had this kind of mix of first explaining the context of the situation, that we were leaving some parts for the like, for example, 10 or 15 minutes so folks could play, but at the same time we were doing those guided walkthrough. So those, for example, who did not do bring your own device, which was optional, as we put it, could also follow. So I think this having this sense of, let's say, community, or being together in the same scenario is really important. So nobody is feel left out. I think also the topic of this public-private partnership, and also the composition of the team. Shout out to my colleagues. Really kind of emphasized that we had also we had this technical aspect, like starting from technical reports to organizational corporate data. And this really kind of, I hope at least, but by the feedback, I think it did clicked for the people, that how you can start from the report that describes piece of malware, to perhaps some information about how the malware was developed, to people related to the company that developed it, to then the contracts that company had with other entities, to the contracts with other companies and how they related. And yeah, and if you can show a very clear like, let's say, pivot by pivot of how things emerge, then this creates a complete picture. So yeah, so and the second big insight is not to have any intelligence gap essentially in your workshop. Like if you think you can explain this to people, then you have to be sure that you can explain it, let's say, to yourself, and not make guesses about the process.
That's awesome. I love that you said like the light bulb moment, right? That's for all the work that goes into developing content. Like one of the things that's most satisfying for I think us within Vertex is if we can do a workshop or a class and have that light bulb moment, like walk people through what you're trying to teach and have it land. Like that's super satisfying as an instructor or as a workshop developer.
Yeah, like when either of you is running a workshop and participants are actively like uncovering connections, like when is the moment that tends to click for people in the process, would you say, or is it hard to pinpoint?
I mean, for us, I think it was hard to pinpoint because the time was very compressed workshop in those 90 minutes. We were not like asking for feedback each stage, but I think the indication that it clicked was that we moved from these technical aspects to the organizational aspects, and we didn't have the multiple hands raised like what is going on now, but it kind of came the flow was that folks could see like what we are aiming at and what we could see. So I think for me the indication was that there was not confusion as we switch context very much from essentially talking about malware and indicators to talking about companies.
Do people tend to walk away from workshops, with a change in how they approach investigations? Do they share that information with you, Jen and Camille? Like they're like, now because of this workshop, this is how I'm going to approach things differently.
It's interesting. I feel like kind of like Camille, right? We don't always get specific feedback like, oh, I really liked this part of the workshop, or I really liked the way you presented this thing. And it's not always in the moment where we can tell if we did a good job or a poor job. Often it comes afterwards, and we'll have people follow up with us and just get little aside comments that, that was really interesting, or it was educational, or, now that I went through, your workshop or your training class, like this makes sense to me now where it didn't make sense before. So we get like those little satisfying snippets, but it seems fairly rare to get like very detailed, specific feedback, especially in the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think we didn't have either like the immediate comment about how that would change their view, but also it was probably too early for this kind of feedback. Like the folks sign up for one of the CyCon sessions, they might not know like if they did not sign for like a training or something that they would put in very very much advance and have certain expectation. I mean, probably some did, but in general, it was very open to the audience. So I think many were just submerged into this topic. So I hope it. I mean, either it changed or it showed them different ways how to approach those complex relationships. So yeah, but we didn't have any very immediate I think feedback yet that this is now how they're going this way.
That's understandable. If I may ask, can we talk about the role that Synapse played within this particular workshop?
Yeah, sure. So I think the biggest or the reason why we wanted to use it is the flexibility of data model. So in the platform, once again, we had the technical report with the modeled indicators like the malware names or the IP addresses, hashes, and so on. But we needed a platform that in the same way will store information about the people and position in companies and be able to link, for example, author of a malware to a person and then to a company. So that's why Synapse was useful because we could show like this step by step what was happening there. So yeah, so we needed a platform that would be able to handle those and different types of findings because I think it would be very kind of insincere from our part if we show like yeah, this is how you create a cluster, but then you need I don't know different tooling or ultimately it's Excel sheets because you're writing things down. So we wanted to have this very practical approach. Like this is actually what you can do in Threat Intel space in this sample Threat Intel platform that supports certain way of working and yeah and deliver it in that way.
What do you think the future of attribution is? Is it better data, better collaboration, or better tooling, or is it the combination of all three?
That's that's a big one. So for the attribution part particularly, I'm not sure. Probably depends on how much attribution would you need, because like when talking about attribution to a specific group, specific third actor, especially in the state nexus context, it's often very difficult to do without this kind of visibility that's only available to governments, and which can then trace back the actual activity through law enforcement or intelligence means to certain either persons or organizations. But I think data from the private sector perspective and from what it can be, about what can be achieved, the data is there. The tooling is probably also there, but the collaboration aspect. I mean, again, I'm a strong proponent of having mandatory regional expertise, let's say, because just the mirror imaging, and especially I think in the context of what happened in Europe after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and how there were many analysis that very much like seeing the Russian activities through lens of what would be done in West, essentially, is something difficult to tackle challenge if you don't have this someone that might not be even into, let's say, into cyber, but be an expert in how things are done in different cultures in different parts of the world.
I think it's a combination. I think that like the people, the tooling, the data all have to come together in the right way to enable whatever your goal is from an intelligence perspective. I'm kind of curious with attribution, like proper attribution back to, people and organizations and so on, becoming more complex for so many reasons. If we'll start to see more companies decide that they're not getting any value from it, there's definitely a place for it for those organizations that can act on that knowledge. But I'm curious whether commercial companies or companies that are doing threat intel to protect their own networks will decide, you know what, it's more important for us simply to defend what we have and worry less about exactly who's doing it. Like they were just expending too much time and effort on this complex problem because it's cool to be able to say who was behind it, especially if they have a fun threat name, right? A bear or a Chilima or a blizzard or something, right? Versus like, we just need to defend the network, right? We're here to protect our data. We're here to protect our customers, and who's doing it is less important. So I'll be curious as to what that looks like in another 10 years, Callie.
Yeah. We'll be talking in another limited series.
20 podcasts
Yeah.
for 20 years at the Vertex Project.
Oh boy, that's a lot. So Camille, is the workshop going to be available for people who weren't able to go to CyCon, or is it strictly for the participants that were able?
No, for participants. So for CyCon, some talks and panels are recorded, but workshops are not recorded. So unfortunately, it was live only event. Yeah. So this is it. I hope we might be able to maybe to try to maybe do it again at some other occasion, or try to think about some different delivery. But for CyCon, the workshops are not recorded also, because I think it's a correct decision, because also then participants are can be more open, and can share or ask questions without this fear of red light of the camera looking at them. So yeah, this is the format.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Is there anything that you would recommend for people that weren't able to go to CyCon to do that's maybe similar, or just like any advice that you have for people that are trying to, train themselves up?
Read a lot, especially in the sources, or in the area that is your focus, because maybe like a broken clock, but the regional expertise, and understand and avoiding mirror imaging. Like one exercise that I recommend is that when you start getting some ideas or some guesstimates about why the activity was done or why it was done in such manner, try to kind of red team this and think like, is it really what you're thinking, or is it because you're applying the kind of frameworks that are very familiar to you, and because it is done in the West, for example, because this is how NATO countries are doing it, and the legal or the operational framework behind it, and try to challenge those. But yeah, and I think there is a wealth of great sources out there on folks dealing with different threat clusters and different aspects, and it's really available. I mean, I'm surprised how much how much information is out there in the public, and how much analysis is there. So I would first define a focus that you would like to have, and then just go for it in terms of deep of research.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, we are winding down to the hour, and I just wanted to say thank you to you both. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Camille, for being here today. I hope everybody will tune in for our next episode in our limited series. But Camille, how can people find you if they wanted to connect with you?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty Googleable. So I've got like LinkedIn and Blue Sky and still Twitter profile. So it's probably pretty easy to follow my work, or find some recordings, or just connect through one of those platforms. So yes, so just feel free to Google me, or type it in the search bar of LinkedIn, or other services. I should be there.
I know how you feel. I have a unique name as well, so I'm very findable.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but thank you very much for both of your time today. I absolutely appreciate it, and we will catch everybody in the next episode of our limited series. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you very much once again for the invitation.
Of course. Thanks for listening to Signals and Stories. If you found this episode useful, be sure to follow the series and share it with your team. For more on how the Vertex Project approaches intelligence, from data modeling to real investigations, visit vertex.link. We'll see you in the next episode.